What I want to talk to you about today is some of the case studies, and although we listed some with Pauline early on, I'm only going to talk about a couple of those, and I'm going to talk about some others. But basically, we I'll give you an introduction to us. We're a national nonprofit in the United States to promote sustainable biomass energy use and development. And the reason we were established was because there really was this hole in service to primarily public entities, schools, hospitals, universities, institutions, for an alternative to fossil fuels. And in Canada, I don't think the situation is much different, though we'll talk a little bit about it. What I want to focus on is that in terms of total energy consumption, I have to switch to the... My apologies if this shows up in anybody's eye. Okay, so the oil component, which is about 32% in Canada, in the United States and in the Northeast, where even though we are a national nonprofit, we really started in the Northeast of the United States, and I'm in Vermont, we use 82% of the US's heating oil in the Northeast, and about 80% of the homes and institutions are heated with heating oil. So that really is our focus. When you get more toward the west, and in Ontario as well as the lake states in the United States, natural gas becomes a higher use. But basically, this is the component, and interestingly enough, that when in the United States, and much like I heard earlier, the Clean Energy Act and in the corollaries in the United States, think of energy as being electricity. And that's unfortunate because about a third of our energy use is for thermal applications and industrial process heat and a variety of other things. And it gets to the question that was raised over here earlier from the gentleman from Austria about thermal incentives. When we think of this, and I'll talk a little bit about why electricity is not the low-hanging fruit for biomass, but what we model is a different model for looking at local energy, that it can have an assistance in terms of climate change and renewable energy, of course, but the two key ones are below, the sustainable forestry and rural economic development that are really not a part of the fossil fuel picture. What keeps our forests forests, and what helps keep energy dollars local. I know in the Northeast, the numbers that we have is $6 billion a year go out of the economy and out of the country to support heating and cooling. Whereas if you used local energy resource, it would be a lot cheaper, but the money that was spent, which would be about a third of that, would circulate in the economy. So the other thing I want to focus on is scale, and the reason I talk about thermal applications in the community scale is that you can see that the scale of uses and amount of wood needed is considerably different. Now, apologize for the US units, but it gives you this scale anyway, reference. There's a lot of talk about cellulosic ethanol in the United States, about how to take wood, and I guess we discovered that corn wasn't going to do it for us. So now we're going to switch to processing wood. And the scale of those plants, even one plant is going to require up to 1.5 million tons of wood in one location. Compare that to, and also power plants are on the scale of 200,000 to 600,000 tons per year. To give you a sense of that, the Minister of Education was just talking about 4,900 schools in Ontario, right? On average, those are going to use about up to 1,000 tons, but 1,000 is a pretty large high school. So, somewhere between there. But even if we said 1,000 tons per school, so for 490,000 tons of wood, you could heat all the schools in Ontario. That's about the size of one power plant. A 50 megawatt power plant is going to burn about that much. So the difference, well, Sometimes I feel badly that I always have to point this out, but trees are heavy. Anybody notice that? They also tend to grow in diffuse, dispersed areas. So the idea of putting them onto a truck and carry them to a central location where you can bring in 1.5 million tons of those or 600,000 tons of those doesn't make a lot of sense. So the alternative is your schools, although not heavy, are dispersed, and they tend to be surrounded by woods. So you could use the local resource in different places. But that's why we focus on the community scale, really, to get at these type of applications: community district heat, schools, hospitals, institutions. So the efficiency is also important here. What I want to show you is that on the left side are the thermal applications of using industrial process heat, building heat at, between 60 and 80% efficient, depending on where you are. On the right side, electric generation. So those at best are 20 to 25% efficient. So not only would you, if you're producing electricity from biomass, not only are you using 400 to 600,000 tons per year, but you're actually only using a quarter of the energy value, and for every 3 pieces of wood you have, or 4 pieces of wood you have, you're throwing 3 of them away and using 1. Whereas it's the opposite on the opposite side of the scale. So what we like to promote is what we call heat-led thermal combined heat and power applications. Heat-led is more like this range, where you're producing the amount of heat you need, and the electricity you get is a smaller margin, but it's essentially gotten at the same level of efficiency that you would with just clear thermal applications. So the purpose of this talk is to tell you what clients like, and there are 2 things they like. One thing is they like it to be less expensive than their fossil fuel alternative, and 2, they want it to be reliable. And to get to the reliability piece, you need to deal with these components: the fuel source, the transportation delivery, the fuel storage, handling, and the combustion systems. They are all integral and important. So a couple of examples. This is an elementary school in Barre, Vermont, and it was installed in 1991. It's a relatively small school, 160,000 square feet, 1,000 students. They were spending about $120,000 a year on their heating. When they installed the biomass system, that dropped to $19,000 a year in fuel costs. So they were saving about $100,000 a year for a school that now, 12 years later, has saved $1.2 million that has gone back into the school and not spent elsewhere. So that's pretty considerable for a school. We also use it in state office buildings, hospitals. These are all in Vermont. The state capitol is also heated. By the way, that's an actual real size scale model of the state capitol. It would fit in about this table. No, I'm teasing about that. It's a little bigger than that. But I did go to Wisconsin and had a friend introduce me to the state capitol there, and they have a beautiful, if you've ever been there to the state capitol, it's a beautiful domed area that's probably about the size of this building, which I do believe the capital of Vermont could fit into if we needed to. One of the areas that we did where we started to get into district energy, and I'm going to talk a little more about district energy as we move along, is Crotched Mountain Rehabilitation Hospital in Greenfield, New Hampshire. That is a hospital that has multiple buildings. It needs steam. It has rehabilitation pools that are heated, and it installed a 12 million BTU system for about $4 million and saves approximately, I think it's in the order of about $300,000 a year now that it has switched over. This is just a picture. The boiler building is pretty compact, and wood storage, which trailers come back up into these systems, and then the wood chips are conveyed into the boiler systems. There are also beautiful examples from around not only Europe, but also Scandinavia, and I know there are some representatives here. Biomass Energy Resource Center was fortunate enough to do some case studies, which I will show you the reference to, but I'm sure all of you can see this from where you are. These are printed versions, but they're all on our website. We did 45 case studies looking around the world. Europe, primarily Denmark, Sweden, Germany, Italy, Austria, and which obviously Scandinavia included, and then some in Canada. We did 10 facilities in Canada and 25 in the United States. Really good examples. Europe is approximately, and Scandinavia are approximately 20-25 years ahead of the United States, and probably, I'll say, 21 years ahead of Canada. They have great technology in addition to thinking of district energy systems as another public utility or system in there. In the United States, water and sewer are municipal services that are provided. The idea of providing heat as a municipal service is just foreign to us, as I think it would be to the Europeans who look at heat, that everybody has their own little heating plant in their homes and businesses, is as foreign to them as it would be if downtown North Bay if all the businesses and residents had drilled wells in their backyards. Doesn't make sense. We can also use this in community energy systems, housing. This is a senior housing project that uses pellets. This is an interesting one. NRG Systems is a leader in wind instrumentation for the world, a world leader in wind instrumentation. But they have a pellet system to heat their buildings, and these are pictures of their pellet boilers. Pellet delivery is a little easier than wood chips. It can be delivered in grain trucks, pneumatically or by auger. Middlebury College just opened a new combined heat and power biomass system, district energy for their campus, and also about 2.5 megawatts of electricity generation. And this is a Swedish application in Hovmantorp, which is a district energy system. Basically produces heat, buys wood chips at about $8 per million BTU in US dollars, and sells the energy at equivalent to $25 per million BTU. This is in Denmark, an application which is actually a true gasifier, meaning takes takes wood, converts it to a gas, and then pipes it much like natural gas, and then uses it to produce electricity and heat. There are secondary and tertiary combustion systems that call themselves gasifiers, but this is the first real commercial application we've found of a gasifier. But the fuel supply is also important. Clients are all concerned about reliability of fuel supply. I think John pointed that out in the public perception of things. Why do they consider fossil fuel to be a reliable fuel supply and wood to not be when it's in their backyard? Those are things we have to work on. But in terms of tonnages, we got to make sure this is sustainable. If the wood is not sustainable, this whole thing falls apart. I won't go through these numbers because I'm out of time, but suffice it to say, we seem to have plenty of wood within a 20 or 30 mile radius of where we are. So that leaves me to just bringing your attention to case studies that we have done for US, Canada, and Europe and Scandinavia, and also a database of facilities that is on our website. Database is not quite populated yet, so if you go there you won't see a lot, but there are a variety of facilities there. And with that, I'll stop. Thank you very much.